Hi everybody, this is Frank with Tiny Plastic Spaceman here to bring you another book review, this time featuring Modulation and Light Techniques from Ammo by Mig Jimenez. I was at the Nuremberg Toy Fair earlier this year, 2016, and Mig was there in person for most of the show. And I was lucky enough to have a good chat with him actually about quite a few things, and one of the things I got from him was this book, which I've seen in various scale model magazines here in the UK, and I'm sure it's available in the US as well, and you can get it directly from the Ammo Mig Jimenez website, migjimenez.com. This is the English version, and basically this is specific to scale model guys, but I think it's very relevant to wargamers, especially if you do any sort of tanks and stuff like that. And obviously you can scale down these techniques for infantry and even buildings and stuff like that. There is an example right on the cover of a really nice, and we'll get to some detail shots of that as well. Try not to blind the camera too much with these lights. This is my brand new photo table setup, so this is the first thing I'm doing on it. Anyway, so let's just dive right in. First of all, it is called Modulation and Light Techniques. 4 techniques to create light effects and volume in military vehicles and dioramas. So the first thing, there's zenithal, which I think most people who are familiar with airbrush and stuff like that are very familiar with. Then color modulation, which is also very popular in the wargame community. Illumination by panels, which isn't really used all that much, I don't think. It will be interesting to try that. And then spotlight technique, which is it's kind of almost like OSL or object source lighting. Well, it basically is really. In this sense, it's used specifically for a really nice diorama, but it can be used on the tabletop, I think, quite well. So let's dive right in. So here we go. We've got the table of contents. Obviously, again, we've got zenithal, color modulation, illumination by panels, and spotlight technique. But the very first thing in the table of contents is styles and color theory, basic info about color, which is interesting. It's very good to see that. Again, this is aimed specifically at scale model guys, specifically tanks and vehicles, but there is a lot. Try not to put too much into these sorts of all the pictures of scale models and stuff like that. If you go into enough detail on any wargaming model, you will be using a lot of scale modeling techniques. And if you paid attention to stuff over the years, especially the last few years, you'll see that, or you will, you should know that a lot of the scale model stuff has definitely been creeping at varying speeds, depending on the technique and how easy it is to use, into wargaming stuff. So this is just an example, a pretty good example actually. Color modulation on the left here, and then just a plain, think of that as that's probably done just all in gray, and then just a single coat of the base color, or this the single color, I should say. So you can see that there's a lot of difference even before you do things like the weathering and stuff like that. I'm not going. If you're familiar with my Horus Heresy Masterclass Volume 1 review, I'm not going to go into detail. I'm not going to be reading all this stuff. I'm trying to keep this short and informative, but thorough. So I will just kind of speed along on some of these pages. One of the things that's really nice is examples like this, where it shows you what a spotlight sort of effect is like and what a more realistic light is like. This is an example of zenithal lighting. So you can see that it's shaded on the bottom there, which is a very stylized sort of technique. It doesn't look realistic now, but once you put weathering and stuff on it, it really is eye-catching, but not photorealistic, but it is very nice looking. It should be noted that the scale model guys, especially figure painters in the last several years, especially the guys from Spain, which is where this book is from. Obviously Mig is Spanish, and Javier, the guy who wrote this book, is also Spanish. So a lot of the techniques come from that sort of school of those guys who share techniques and everything. So in a sense, we're very lucky to have it translated into English for us. So anyway, I don't want to get too much into that, but and again, you can see here's an example of the plain color and then color modulation. So you can see that, you know, it may not look super realistic. It may look hyper realistic, or super saturated, or whatever you want to call it. But this is way more, way more interesting to look at than this. And that is the whole point of a lot of this preface, and also, to show what these various techniques look like. Illumination by panels is a little bit more difficult to explain, and there are full examples that we'll get to in a minute. But you can see here, this is illumination by panels, and this is the plain standard sort of color. So you can see that this is that's not shaded, that's not actually in shadow. You can actually see that there's light, the studio light, from the photo session where this was taken, is actually reflecting off of that a bit, but that's actually a darker color green, this hue or shade of green. And especially this right here, see this panel here, it may not show up very well in the video, but there, I think you can see there, this panel is actually painted much darker. So that's actually paint, it's not light. And that's kind of the point of this sort of thing. So, of the book. So here we go, here's the spotlight technique. The spotlight is shining on this corner. So you can see the spotlight sort of spreads, and then when it hits here, there's highlights, and then over here, and then it shades on the other side, which they're not showing. And then here's all the techniques on this same exact piece of tank, the same model of tank. And you can see plain, and then there's zenithal, and then the three main styles that are covered in this. So here we go about the color theory, which is quite interesting, really. And there's a lot of overlap with, if you read scale model magazines and have other books from Mig or other scale model specialists. A lot of the stuff they really drive home the point that if you have green, for example, which is obviously a very popular color in scale model tanks, adding black does one thing, adding white does something else, but ideally you want to shade it with something like the opposite color, which would be a reddish. So that's why they showed this here. That's probably a super simplified way of reading it, but again, I'm not going to go word for word here. But it gives you a very good idea of how to shade the various colors. And having something like this color wheel, which you can pick up in any art or craft store, or online if you really have to, they're just a few dollars or a few pounds. Very, very helpful to give you things like these, the analogous colors, the split complementary colors, the primary colors. So, the basic things like the warm colors and the cool colors, that sort of stuff. It's very, very helpful to have something like that around. Because if you're painting something orange and you go, well, what's the shade color of orange, or the complementary color of orange? Very simple. You just look on your color wheel. So again, we've got, this is a very good example of a tank. It's got flat panels on it, and it has a few rounded panels. So you got zenithal lighting, which is, I mean, to me, it's kind of the basic level of using an airbrush, you know, apart from just plain base coating or priming. Then you got color modulation, which basically is what the Forge World guys use. All the Forge World style techniques, this is what they use. Some of the more advanced guys might use illumination by panels, which is just a bit more work. And then the spotlight technique, again, that's just a very, very, very light white, light green, and then fading into super, super dark green here. So it's actually, you know, obviously these are computer renders, but that would actually be just a very, very dark green if you were painting it like that. So it'll be interesting to see what, you know, if people take this sort of thing to heart with putting them on, say, a Land Raider or a Rhino or something like that. It's something that's very slab-sided. Right, so starting with zenithal, and again, if you're familiar with scale model magazines, or like Tamiya Model magazine or the Mig Weathering magazine, these will be very familiar to you, these sorts of layouts. Basically, start with the finished product and then how you get there. So in this example, they actually use 6 different colors of green, if you can believe it. The normal Wargamer painter may not use that much. If you're going for something like Golden Demon, maybe you will, but you know, you can probably get away with 2 colors of green, maybe 3 colors of green, and just use a lot of black. So this is, yeah, so they do show exactly how they do that. So there's, yeah, a couple different tanks. So what they do, one of the things that they do is they start with a very easy to use tank like the Sherman. There's rounded details on it. A lot of the stuff is you know, is cast in iron or whatever it was way back when. And so you can see that they go step by step on how to just do the priming. So here they're doing olive drab with a tiny bit of brown to do the undersides. And then, but you can see once, as they're going through, they start with the darker colors, and then they steadily progress to the lighter and lighter colors here, you can see. And they're going in sequence. So you can see they leave some areas dark. You see underneath the turret there, underneath the gun. And eventually they work up to a very light, you know, all the highlights. And this is where I was talking about the overlap, the oil dot weathering. So they put a bunch of oil dots on here after a gloss varnish, I should say, or I think actually a satin varnish. And then they basically streak them down with odorless turpentine, and you end up with a cool fading streak effect. So you can see where on this flat panel of the Sherman, you got the dark bottom edge, and then the fading streakiness. So I mean, that one technique will add loads and loads of dimension, and then if you put that on top of the zenithal shading, there's just more and more layers and layers of detail and depth to the model. The scale model guys love depth. So here we go with the pigments. They're adding lots of mud pigments and rust pigments and stuff like that. So like I said, lots and lots of overlap. Here's mud spatter, just taking a wet brush, dipping it in various brown and black inks, and just spattering it with the airbrush onto the tank. And then you end up with something quite cool. You know, I mean, this is, if you walk past this in an army, you know, like a tank museum or something like that, you know, that wouldn't look out of place at a tank museum like Bobbington or something like that, where they actually drive the tanks around. And then this is the final version of the tank. They actually set it on a really cool base, which, you know, again, You could learn so much from this, and just apply these techniques, just not even really scale them down, but if you're doing like a large, say a night base or something like that, you scale it down, and you have all this grass and all this stuff. It'll just look so much better than something that's on just a plain sand base. So here we go with color modulation. Again, this is sort of the what I call the Forge World technique, the basic Forge World technique, and this is it. You know, and to people who don't use an airbrush or have never even picked one up, this is magic. You know, sad to say, it's not really that hard. It just involves a bit of masking tape and patience once you learn how to use an airbrush. So you can see here they're actually shading it with purple. Very interesting. You can see here this particular turret, they're shading it with just black and white. Very cool. And then, so here we go. We've got the tank with lots of brass etched detail and a turned metal barrel. And then they throw down a lot of very dark brown shading. And then they do, is the base next? Yeah, the base coat's next. And then they start putting in the highlights. You can see the relative colors of the highlights as they go lighter and lighter. See, just lighter and lighter. And so the main effect is, and this is actually a perfect example of a typical sort of Space Marine Forge World type vehicle. Very slab-sided, just flat panels, a couple of curvy bits, and about the same amount of detail that you would find on a Forge World type tank. And, you know, with how many colors is that? If you're not counting the gray primer, that's 5 colors of paint. Whereas, you know, if you were, say, on a budget, you're just starting out painting and you want to try this out yourself, it's very easy to get, say, this color of paint and that color of paint, put the base down, and then just slowly add in 1 drop of paint, 1 drop of the light paint to get that, 2 drops of paint to get that, and then finally, you know, you're mixing in 1 drop of paint with a paint cup full of this color to get this. And then finally, your final highlight would actually be that color, actually. So you can see how they get there very, very easily. Let's see. They're doing a wash. I think in this bit here, they're actually doing they're using a brush to catch all the bits that you wouldn't be able to do with an airbrush. And you notice they've actually got wire details on there and the tools and stuff like that. You know, like someone who's going for a Golden Demon level type of thing, they would probably paint those all separate and glue them on or something like that. But they've left the wire on, and once you see the final version of this, it's just amazing. And all they're doing is they've left it on. They haven't attached anything, and they're just using the brush to pick out those details, like these straps that they just want to visually just pop just a little bit. And in the final bit, they're not actually covering any of that up. It it just continues to look better and better. Here they're doing a bit of masking to catch just the tank hatch or the crew hatch. And you can see this is really nice. They're actually doing a little bit of spotlight technique where they're getting this area to be brighter than if you're looking at it from this angle. But if you look at it from the opposite angle, this area is darker, so that's all hidden. I mean, it's just the amount of detail that these guys do. If they entered probably any Golden Demon, they'd win it. And now they're doing the weathering. There's the oil dots. They're using washes, pin washes, all sorts of things. And like I said, there's a lot of overlap. There's where they're doing the streaks. And here, this particular example, they're using a toothpick and a wet brush to do the spatter effect. So there's all sorts of different ways you can do it. There's a very simple masking technique. And here's the final the final tank. Now remember, all those details were already on there. So and this is a much, well, I'd say this is just a little bit more detailed than, say, a Land Raider or something like that, just a standard Land Raider. And then here it is in the actual setting of the base. You've got a German tank crew member reading a letter, looking quite sad. The guy even put a lizard crawling on the barrel of the gun. And so the next one is Illumination by Panels. Now this one is a little bit more difficult to explain than the previous one. This one says each plane can be painted a different hue of the same color range, painting the lighter tones in the areas more exposed to light and the darker colors in the shadows, which sounds pretty much what they were doing, but it's much different. A good example is this here, where they're using this, the front is going to be exposed to the light, and then as it fades, or as the light fades and it gets darker, you can see they actually do very, very harsh gradient there, where you can see what it's going to be fading to. So the light is coming from this side, and on this side it's fading into almost black. Now these guys never actually use black, but you get the idea. So they've done, you can see, here's an example where they're doing the weathering. This is the oil dot weathering, so that's why there's loads of splotches of color on it. This side is very, very dark tan, or brown, I guess, and this is a very, very light tan. And you can tell, you can see the colors that they use. It goes from this color to that color. So it's quite interesting. And then, so once they're using this example where they're using, they actually took put it in Photoshop and traced out all the panel lines to show how they're unifying everything with the oil washes and the oil streaking and weathering. So it doesn't look so stark, basically. So again, this is about pin washes here. And all the washes. So there's a lot of techniques that carry straight over. If you're used to doing it, I hate to say the basic method for wargamers, it's just almost exactly the same, or just a little bit more advanced when you take it to scale, the scale modeling guys. They just do it a little bit different, but it's the same technique, just a little bit different. A little bit more work goes into it. And here's a really nice example of how to muddy up tank tracks. Lots of pigments. You only need 4 colors of pigments. I mean, I have a full set of the Vallejo stuff, but you don't need it. It's nice to have. It looks good on the shelf, but. And then there's the finished model with all the wear on the treads. Weathering and the chipping and stuff like that. It's really cool looking. And then here it is, and this is why I kind of prefer if they had put this picture at the beginning, so you can understand these 2 pictures actually, so you can see that it's emerging out of some villa archway, and the back end is sort of like, if you can imagine this is an enclosed garage or something like that. And even look at the base, it's completely black or very, very dark brown there and over here, but on the other 2 sides it's a very light tan color, just like the tank. And then here's a good example from directly from the side. So that's why this was done in that particular way. There's a quite harsh line on the actual tank of where it goes to shadow. But when you're looking at it, there's a great view of it here, or actually better from here. So this is where the light is actually coming from the viewer's eye in this camera angle. So you don't see any shadow, but you look at the base, there's no shadow at all. And if you imagine that wall was the rest of the garage. So yeah, it's very, very good. So Here's the spotlight technique, and again, this is pretty much the finished model, and it will be in situ. This is the longest bit. I think this is the longest section. There's quite a lot for this section. I'll try and go through it relatively quickly though. But this is a good example. This is just using you know, the World War II era VW Beetle, with had, you know, a lot of rounded parts to it. And you can see that there's a spotlight technique on this pillar, and the light is coming from this side, and you can see it here. So that is actually paint. That's not a light effect at all. You can see it here with the pillar gone, and it in a full studio, you know, against a white background. So here's the most extreme example of the complementary color shading. You've got green, and the complementary color is, let me make sure that's correct actually, the complementary color. Got green, and they're using a dark blue. Well, I suppose you wouldn't use purple, but so yeah, so they're using just a darker color to get that extreme darkness on the sides that are going to be. Now, again, this is the same tank here. So if you imagine the tank is behind there, and as you emerge around, I don't know if that makes sense, but you'll see it in the thing here. Here's a super extreme example. So this is there's literally a spotlight on facing on this area of the tank, and as you go inside, you know, that's not light, that's actual paint. So very, very interesting. And again, he's showing how another way to do tank treads here, using an old school Citadel color as well. So this is I believe this is the finished version. It's got all the chipping and stuff on it. Chipping and rust effects and dust and all that. And there's just more and more pictures. You can see here's a really good example of it, how it goes from really, really bright to just almost just total blackness. And here's the actual scene. And you see it's a diorama. So you can imagine that off of this is another tank with a spotlight, you know, aimed at these guys. And this guy's already on his knees because they're surrendering. They're coming out of the tank. And as we go on, it actually shows you how this guy, first up, he mocked up where the tank would be sitting with the unpainted tank. And then as he's got everything built, he's got it built and then primed, and then oh no, this is actually with the lighting. So he's seeing where the light is going to be actually hitting in his mock-up. And there he is, painting the actual thing. So he's got the diorama almost completely done before he actually even does the tank. So it's a very very interesting sequence of photos here. Very, very cool. And then here's it almost done. He's painted the tracks, but they're not glued on yet, so they're taped. So you can see even the roof gets the sort of spotlight effect treatment. And there's that's an almost finished diorama there. So it's really, really cool. And you can see, you know, as you get the close-ups, you can see there's like, I mean, to me that looks like hairspray and salt weathering or chipping. I love the way that you can see even just on the screen there, you can see the treads of the exploded, the tread tracks in the bricks from the exploded building. And here's a really good example of, this is a white card. So you can, you know, it's just to prove that it's not just light. This is actually painted lighter than this area here. Very cool. And again here on the tank. The only thing I didn't like about this diorama, and I hate to nitpick, is the windows. They're obviously 2D, but maybe ran out of time to finish. So then here's the guys that are surrendering. It's a really neat diorama. And then interestingly, there's like a comic of, oh, there's an innocent factory, plane drops a bomb, and then boom! And then this tank comes along and he's like, oh, well, we're just going to hide here. So that's it. That is Modulation and Light Techniques. And there's a gentleman who wrote the book and did all the models. So I hope you like that. If you'd like to see more of these sorts of videos, let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think of this, and if I missed anything, if you have any questions or anything along those lines, be happy to answer anything. I will be reviewing more books and magazines from Ammo by Mig Jimenez, so be sure to look out for those. Please subscribe and check out the website tinyplasticspaceman.com, and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/tinyplasticspaceman. Thanks very much. This has been Frank. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please let me know in the comments below what you would have liked to see, or what your general thoughts are. All right. Thanks very much. Goodbye.